The stars shimmered in the vastness of space, but for Lyra, the vast emptiness had become a reminder of everything she had lost. Her once thriving planet was now a graveyard of broken cities and scattered remnants. The war had come quickly, destroying her home and her people. Her husband, the love of her life, had fallen in the conflict, leaving her with nothing but her 2 children to care for. Alone and desperate, Lyra found herself wandering the galaxy, looking for hope. Her species, the viral, were not known for seeking help from others, but these were extraordinary times. The transmission she sent wasn't one of anger or pride. It was a raw plea for survival. Her words were simple but filled with desperation. "Please, I beg you, take my children and me. We have nowhere left to go." The transmission had been received by an unexpected person. Victor Reed, a wealthy human magnate, had long since made a name for himself in the galaxy. His empire stretched across several star systems, his wealth and power unmatched. He was used to negotiating with governments and corporations, but an alien widow's desperate plea was something he had never encountered. Victor sat in the control room of his private space station, staring at the message on his screen. The hologram of Lyra appeared, her features weary, her skin a soft shade of lavender that marked her as a viral. Her eyes were filled with the sadness of a mother who had lost everything. She spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people are gone, my home destroyed. My children, they have no future. I ask for nothing but a place to stay, a chance to live." Victor paused the transmission and leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping against the armrest. He had always been a pragmatic man, not one to be moved easily by emotion. But something in Lyra's voice struck a chord. He knew little of the viral, but he could hear the pain in her words. It was raw, genuine. She was not seeking riches or power, only refuge. He activated a secure channel and made a call to his assistant, Mara. "Get me the latest reports on the viral. I need to know everything about them. And make arrangements for me to meet this woman." Mara's voice came through the comms, calm and efficient. "Understood, sir. I'll have everything ready." Victor knew this wasn't just a simple request for help. There was something more to it. The viral were not a peaceful species by nature, or so the reports suggested. They were warriors, known for their fierce independence and their unwillingness to accept help from outsiders. Yet here was Lyra, a widow, begging for something most would never ask, a chance for survival. As Victor waited for the information to come through, he couldn't help but think about the implications. Helping her could mean involving himself in a conflict he knew little about. It could lead to political complications, perhaps even danger. But then again, it could also be an opportunity to do something good, to make a difference in a universe that often felt cold and indifferent. An hour later, Mara returned with the reports. The viral were once a powerful race, but their civilization has been shattered by war. They are known for their martial prowess, but they are also an incredibly proud species. What you have here, sir, is a plea from someone who has lost everything. The war with the Togorans devastated their planet, and it's clear that Lyra is one of the last of her kind. Victor read through the details, absorbing the gravity of the situation. He could see the potential for conflict if the viral were to come to Earth looking for retribution, but he could also see the opportunity to help someone who had no other options. His gut told him that helping her was the right thing to do. He stood up, his decision made. "Prepare a transport. I'm going to meet her." As Victor boarded his personal shuttle, a mix of curiosity and uncertainty filled him. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but he knew that this meeting could change everything. Lyra's image appeared in the shuttle's hologram display as the shuttle prepared to leave. She looked even more fragile up close, her face tired, her children clinging to her side. She didn't know who Victor was or what his intentions might be. But in her eyes, there was hope, a fragile, desperate hope. Victor took a deep breath. He didn't know if he was doing the right thing, but one thing was certain. This meeting would mark the beginning of a new chapter in both their lives. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it descended through Earth's atmosphere, cutting through the sky toward the grand estate of Victor Reed. The landing pad, a sleek platform with sharp lines and metallic gleam, seemed an odd contrast to the women and children it would soon greet. The sight of Earth's vast green fields, cities stretching far into the distance, and the hum of human civilization felt foreign and overwhelming to Lyra. She had traveled across countless star systems, but nothing could prepare her for this moment. Her first step onto a planet where she knew nothing, where she was nothing. Lyra stood at the entrance of the shuttle, her heart racing. Her two children, Nira and Kale, clung to her sides. Nira, the elder of the two, had a quiet, serious look about her, while Kale, barely 5 years old, held on with wide eyes, taking in everything with the awe of a child seeing the world for the first time. They had been through so much already, and Lyra had promised them a better future. Now, she hoped her fragile plea for help would be enough. Victor Reed stood at the bottom of the stairs leading from the shuttle, waiting for them. His dark eyes watched the newcomers closely, taking in every detail. He had expected an alien, but the reality of it still left him momentarily speechless. Lyra's lavender skin shimmered in the light, and her eyes were a deep, almost haunting shade of violet. She was beautiful in a way that wasn't human, yet there was a softness to her, a sadness that drew him in. The first steps she took onto Earth felt heavy. With each footfall, she could hear the hum of the human world around her, the sound of distant voices, the rustle of the trees, the busy city below. It was a world she never thought she would visit, let alone live in. But she was here, with nowhere else to go. Victor cleared his throat, stepping forward to greet her. "Lyra, I assume." She nodded, her voice soft but steady. "Yes, I am Lyra. Thank you for meeting me." She glanced at Victor, then at the ground, unsure of what to say next. She had no idea what he expected from her, what she should do. She was a stranger here, and all her strength was now focused on keeping her family together. Victor offered a polite smile. "It's my pleasure. Welcome to Earth." His voice was warm, but there was a tension in the air that neither of them could ignore. "Let's get you and your children settled. I'm sure you're exhausted from the journey." Lyra nodded again, grateful for the kindness, though she could sense an underlying curiosity in Victor's gaze. He wasn't quite sure what to make of her, of them. It was clear that no one in the human world had ever seen an alien like her before, and his people were far from accepting of what they didn't understand. They walked together toward the mansion, its grandeur standing in stark contrast to the crumbled homes Lyra had left behind. She couldn't help but feel the weight of her situation, the burden of being a foreigner in this world. Victor's estate was an island of wealth and power, built to house someone who had everything. And here she was, standing in its shadow, with nothing but her children and a plea for help. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was calm, though the silence seemed to press against her. Servants, all human, watched her with curiosity but remained silent. Lyra could feel their eyes on her, but she refused to show weakness. She had endured the fall of her civilization, the loss of her people, and now she would not let fear show in front of her children. Victor led them into a sitting room with large windows overlooking the sprawling estate. The walls were adorned with expensive art, the furniture polished and carefully chosen. Yet despite the luxury, there was an odd coldness to the space. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a show, an exhibition of wealth and power. And Lyra couldn't help but wonder if she and her children were just another part of it. "Please, make yourselves comfortable," Victor said, gesturing to the couches. "Would you like some food or drink? We have plenty." Lyra hesitated before answering, her throat dry from the long journey. "Water would be fine." Victor nodded, then turned to one of the servants. "Please bring water for our guests." As the servant departed, Victor turned back to Lyra. "I know this is a lot to take in. Earth may seem overwhelming, but we'll do what we can to help you. My team will assist in finding a place for you and your children. You won't have to worry about anything here." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude but also caution. She knew she had to be careful. Victor had offered her safety, but she was not certain of his true intentions. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know what to say. My people, we never asked for help, but we have nowhere else." Victor's gaze softened. "You don't need to thank me. No one should have to live in fear or in the ruins of a destroyed world. You're safe here." But even as he said it, Lyra could sense the questions lingering in the air. Was she truly safe? Would Earth accept her and her children, or would she forever be seen as an outsider? And most importantly, what did Victor really want in return? Her mind raced. But for now, she pushed those thoughts aside. She had a moment of peace, however brief. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of hope. Lyra had never imagined that her arrival on Earth would be so difficult. At first, she had hoped for a simple life, a place where her children could grow without fear. She had dreamed of peace, of a future where her family could rebuild and find a sense of belonging. But as the days passed in Victor Reed's mansion, she realized that the road to acceptance would not be easy. Victor did his best to make her feel welcome. He arranged for her and her children to have everything they needed: clothing, food, even entertainment for the children. But there was a constant undercurrent of tension in the air. The mansion's servants treated her with polite distance, and the visitors who came to see Victor often looked at her with a mix of curiosity and wariness. She had come to Earth as a refugee, but on this new world, she was still an outsider. One morning, after a long night of unsettling dreams about her home planet's destruction, Lyra took her children to the nearby garden to clear her mind. The garden was beautiful, with lush greenery, flowers of every color, and towering trees that seemed to touch the sky. Nira played with the butterflies that fluttered about, while Kel chased after the small creatures he could find. Lyra watched them, a bittersweet smile on her lips. They deserved this happiness, this safety. But the fear gnawed at her heart, the fear that it might all be taken away. "Mother, look." Kel's excited voice broke through her thoughts as he held up a small glowing insect. It buzzed around him, its wings shimmering in the sunlight. Lyra smiled and kneeled down to take a closer look. "That's beautiful, Kel," she said softly. "But be careful. It's fragile." As she spoke, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Victor approaching, his hands in his pockets, a concerned expression on his face. "How are you today, Lyra?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lyra stood, brushing the grass from her dress. "We're adjusting," she replied. "The children seem happy, but I feel like we're just in the way here, like we don't belong." Victor frowned, stepping closer. "I know this must be difficult for you. You've lost everything, but you're not in the way. You're welcome here." Lyra's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sprawling estate met the distant city. "But the people here, they don't see us the same way they see you. They don't understand why we're here, why I'm here." I can feel their eyes on us. Victor sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. There are people who don't understand. Some don't want to understand. Earth isn't ready to embrace a species like yours. But I'm trying, Lyra. I'm doing everything I can to ensure that you and your children have a place here." She nodded slowly but didn't speak. She appreciated his words, but they didn't change the reality she faced every day. Her children were becoming more comfortable with the human world, but Lyra herself struggled. Every day there were whispers behind closed doors, people wondering who she was and why she was here. The truth was, she didn't know if she would ever truly belong. Later that week, the tension in the mansion reached a breaking point. A group of high-profile visitors, all influential figures from Earth's government and business world, arrived for a meeting with Victor. The moment they stepped into the mansion, their eyes immediately fell on Lyra and her children. Their expressions were polite, but it was clear they didn't know what to make of them. Lyra felt the weight of their stares, their judgments. She stood in the corner, clutching her children close, doing her best to ignore the discomfort gnawing at her. One of the visitors, a tall man with graying hair, finally spoke up. "Victor, I didn't know you were hosting guests from such a distant part of the galaxy." His tone was diplomatic, but his words carried an edge of disbelief. Victor turned to him, his expression firm. "Yes, I'm hosting them. Lyra and her children have nowhere else to go. They are not just strangers. They are survivors of a war, and they need our help." The man raised an eyebrow. "I see, but I must admit, I'm not sure how much we can do for them. Humanity has its own issues to deal with. What do you expect us to do? Allow them to live among us?" The room fell silent. Lyra's heart clenched in her chest. She had been expecting some form of rejection, but hearing it spoken so openly in front of her made it sting even more. Victor's voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it now. "I expect you to show compassion. We're not talking about politics or power here. We're talking about lives, human lives and alien lives. If we can't offer a safe haven to those in need, then what does that say about us?" Lyra could see the anger in Victor's eyes, the fierce protectiveness that had grown since their first meeting. It made her feel a strange sense of gratitude, but it also made her question everything. Was he really trying to help them, or was this just another display for his own benefit? The man who had spoken earlier remained silent, his gaze flicking between Victor and Lyra. The other visitors murmured among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Eventually, the conversation shifted to other matters, but the weight of their judgment lingered in the air. That night, after the guests had left, Lyra sat by the window in her room, looking out at the city lights. Mira and Kale were asleep, and for a brief moment, Lyra allowed herself to relax. But she knew the truth. This was only the beginning. She wasn't just fighting for her family's survival. She was fighting for her place in a world that didn't know if it wanted her. And she wasn't sure how long she could keep up the fight. Days passed, and while life at Victor Reed's mansion continued, Lyra could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She had hoped that time would bring her peace, that perhaps Earth would accept her and her children. But instead, it only made her feel more isolated. The mansion was beautiful, the staff polite, but the world outside seemed distant, unwelcoming. The children, though still young, began to notice the difference in how they were treated. Mira, who had always been quiet and observant, would ask questions Lyra couldn't always answer. "Mother, why don't they like us?" Mira would ask as they walked through the gardens, or when she saw the strange looks from some of the humans in the mansion. Lyra didn't have the answers. She only knew that the world they had arrived in was not as kind as she had hoped. It was one quiet afternoon when Lyra sat in the garden, watching Kale play by the fountain, that Victor found her. He had been busy with meetings and decisions for the past few days, and their encounters had grown less frequent. He had a life of his own to manage, and Lyra understood that, but something about the distance between them now felt different. It felt like more than just physical space. It felt like a growing gap between them. "Lyra," Victor's voice broke her thoughts, his presence pulling her attention. He stood by the entrance to the garden, looking more serious than she had ever seen him. "We need to talk." Lyra stood slowly, her eyes scanning his face. His expression wasn't angry, but it wasn't comforting either. There was something urgent about his tone, something she hadn't heard from him before. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice betraying the concern she felt. Her mind raced with possible reasons for this sudden request. "I need to know what you want, Lyra," Victor said, his voice firm but with a hint of uncertainty. "You've been here for weeks now, and I can see that things aren't working as they should. Earth isn't ready to accept you, and frankly, some people don't want to even try. You knew that when you came here. I knew it too. But you haven't said much about what you expect from me, what you want from this arrangement." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had never thought of their stay as an arrangement. She had simply been grateful for the chance to survive, to keep her children safe. But now, hearing Victor's words, it struck her how much she had taken for granted. He had been helping them out of some sense of duty or kindness, but he had a life and goals of his own. He was asking for clarity, something she hadn't been able to provide. "I don't know what I want," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think that far ahead. I only knew that my children and I needed a place to live, a place to be safe. I never imagined that this would be so difficult." Victor's gaze softened slightly. "I understand that, Lyra. But you need to understand, too, that I can't force people to accept you. I can offer you protection, yes, but I can't change how everyone feels. And that's the problem. You're not just surviving here. You're part of something much bigger. You're a symbol of something unknown, something that people fear. I can protect you, but I can't change the way the world sees you." Lyra felt her chest tighten. The weight of his words sank in. She had known that things wouldn't be easy, but hearing it so plainly made it harder to bear. She had hoped that time would heal the wounds between her people and the humans, but it seemed the divide was too deep. "I understand," she said, though the words felt hollow. "I never wanted to be a symbol. I only wanted my children to have a future." Victor was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Finally, he spoke again. "Lyra, if you want to leave, I will help you. You can go wherever you want. There are other planets, other systems. But if you stay here, I need you to understand that you're not just staying in my home. You're stepping into a much bigger world, one that doesn't want you here. And the longer you stay, the more dangerous it will become for both you and your children." Lyra felt the fear stir within her. She had already lost so much, and the thought of losing her children, or seeing them hurt, was unbearable. Yet the thought of leaving, of returning to the unknown, was equally frightening. What would she do? Where would she go? She didn't know anyone beyond this planet, no place where they could be safe. I don't know what to do," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I thought this would be easier. I thought that when I came here, we would find a new life. But it's not like I imagined." Victor nodded slowly, his expression one of empathy. "I understand, Lyra. I really do. But I can't make this decision for you. It's yours to make. I'll help you either way, whether you stay or go." Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. She looked over at her children, who were still playing by the fountain, their laughter filling the air. They were innocent in all of this, untouched by the harsh realities that surrounded them. She wanted to protect them, to give them a future. But did that future lie here, on Earth, or was it somewhere else, far away from the dangers of this world? For the first time since arriving, Lyra realized that the choice before her wasn't just about survival. It was about their future, and what kind of life she could give her children. The path ahead was unclear, and the dangers were real. But for her family, she would find a way, no matter what it took. Lyra spent the next few days in deep thought, weighing the decision that lay before her, the offer from Victor to leave Earth, to find a new place for her children, echoed in her mind like a distant warning. She had arrived on this strange planet hoping for safety, but she hadn't realized how complicated it would be. The acceptance she had hoped for seemed farther out of reach than ever, and Victor's words echoed constantly in her thoughts. "You're a symbol of something unknown, something people fear." It was true. Her very presence was a reminder of the unknown. And as time passed, the weight of it began to show in the eyes of the people around her. The servants who once treated her with politeness now greeted her with uncertainty. They would bow their heads when passing her, never quite meeting her gaze. The guests who came to the mansion, the ones who were supposed to be Victor's allies, only spoke in hushed tones when she was near. Her children, too, felt the discomfort. Lyra's quiet nature made her aware of the growing distance between herself and the humans she encountered, and Cale, though young, mirrored his sister's unease, often asking why they couldn't make friends with the other children they saw on the estate. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the garden. Lyra found herself once again at the fountain. She watched her children as they played by the water, their laughter filling the air like a sweet melody. In that moment, Lyra's heart ached with the weight of her responsibility. She wanted nothing more than to give them a safe, happy life, one free of fear and uncertainty. But could she really offer them that here, on Earth, a planet that was not ready to accept them? Victor had offered her a chance to leave, to find a place where they could start over, somewhere beyond Earth's borders. A part of her wanted to take that opportunity, to leave behind the discomfort and the constant feeling of being an outsider. But another part of her felt a pull toward staying. If she left, would her children ever have a chance to truly understand this planet? Would they always feel like strangers, even in a new place? Lyra took a deep breath, trying to clear her mind. She needed answers, and she needed to make a decision, but the choices were not as clear as she hoped. Her heart told her to stay and fight for a chance to build something here, to show the humans that they were more than just refugees. But her head told her that it might be better to leave while they still had the chance, before the situation worsened. The crunch of footsteps on gravel interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Victor walking toward her, his face serious but softened by concern. She had not spoken to him much in the past few days. She had been lost in her own thoughts, torn between two paths. Seeing him now, standing in front of her, she realized how much she had come to rely on his presence. "Lyra," Victor said softly, his voice carrying a weight of understanding. "You're still thinking about leaving, aren't you?" Lyra nodded, feeling the heaviness in her chest. "I don't know what to do, Victor. I don't know what's best for my children." Victor stepped closer, his expression gentle but firm. "You've been through a lot. I understand why you're torn. But there's something I need you to understand about Earth. It's not just about surviving here. It's about finding a place where you belong. And sometimes, that takes time." Lyra looked down at her hands, which were clasped tightly together. "I want them to feel like they belong. I don't want them to grow up as strangers on this planet. But everywhere I look, I see fear. I see people who don't understand us, who might never understand us." Victor's voice was steady as he spoke, each word carrying the sense of determination. "Fear is natural when faced with the unknown. But you're here, Lyra. You've already made an impact by simply being here. There are people who want to help, who want to see you and your children thrive. It's just going to take time." Lyra met his gaze, her heart heavy with uncertainty. "But how much time? How long can we wait for things to change? How long can my children grow up in a place that doesn't fully accept them?" Victor's gaze softened, and he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I can't promise that it will be easy, but I can promise that you don't have to face this alone. I will be here. We will work together. Earth might not be ready, but I believe that if you stay, if you keep trying, things can change." Lyra felt a warmth spread through her at his words. It wasn't a promise of immediate change, but it was something she hadn't heard before, a promise of support. She had spent so much time feeling alone, like a stranger in a world that wasn't hers. But with Victor's words, she began to feel a small glimmer of hope. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Victor's expression was resolute. "Then we try again. We adapt. We find another way. But we don't give up." Lyra looked over at her children, who were now sitting by the fountain, their heads together as they whispered to each other. They were so young, so innocent, and they deserved a chance at a better life. Her heart swelled with love and determination. She had been afraid of the unknown, of the uncertainty that came with staying on Earth. But now, as she looked at her children, she realized that perhaps the greatest gift she could give them wasn't escape. It was the chance to fight for their place in this world. "I'll stay," she said, her voice firm with a new sense of resolve. "I'll stay for them, for their future." Victor's smile was small but genuine. "Then we'll make sure they have the future they deserve, together." Lyra felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had made her decision. The road ahead would not be easy, but with the strength of her children, and the support of Victor, she knew they could face whatever came next, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would find their place in this world after all. The decision had been made. Lyra had chosen to stay, to fight for her family's place on Earth, despite the obstacles and the doubts that surrounded her. It was not an easy choice, but it was one she had to make for her children. The days that followed were a blur of quiet determination. Lyra focused on helping Nira and Kale adjust to their new life, while Victor continued to work tirelessly on his own projects. But as much as Lyra tried to keep her focus on the small joys, like watching her children laugh and play, the underlying tension in the mansion grew. The whispers among the mansion staff grew louder. Lyra could hear them at night, when the house was quiet and the only sound was the soft hum of the distant city. The humans who visited the mansion no longer spoke to her directly. They would nod politely, but their eyes always held a flicker of unease when they looked her way. It wasn't that they hated her or her children. It was the fear of the unknown, the uncertainty of what her presence meant for the future of Earth. Lyra knew that fear was a powerful thing, but it still hurt. She was not a threat. She had never wanted to be. One morning, as Lyra walked with her children through the garden, she could feel the weight of the mansion's inhabitants on her shoulders. There was something in the air, a tension that had been growing over the past few days. The children were happy as always, running ahead to chase the birds, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something was changing, and it wasn't going to be easy. As they approached the fountain, Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Victor walking toward her, his face grim. His usual warm smile was nowhere to be found, replaced by a serious expression. "Lyra, we need to talk," he said, his voice low. Lyra felt a knot form in her stomach. "What's wrong?" she asked, her mind already racing with possibilities. Victor hesitated for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. "It's the council. They've been talking. There's a growing sentiment against your presence here." Lyra's heart sank. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing it out loud made it feel all the more real. The council, the powerful group of influential humans who govern much of Earth's policies, had always been cautious about accepting her and her children. But this was different. "What does that mean?" Lyra asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Victor ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "It means that some of the most powerful people on this planet are demanding that you leave. They don't want aliens like you here, no matter how peaceful you are. They're afraid that your presence could lead to conflict with other planets. They think your people might bring trouble." Lyra felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. "So they want us to leave?" Victor nodded. "Yes, but I've told them I won't force you to go. I've fought for your right to stay here, but this is bigger than just us. If we don't act quickly, they could pass a law that would make it impossible for you and your children to stay on Earth." Lyra took a deep breath, her mind swirling with disbelief and anger. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had thought they had a chance to build something here, to show the people of Earth that they were not a threat. But now, it seemed like that dream was slipping away. "I didn't come here to cause problems," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted my children to be safe. I never wanted to bring conflict." Victor stepped closer, his expression softening. "I know, Lyra. I know, you've done nothing wrong. But fear doesn't care about that. Fear only sees what it doesn't understand." Lyra turned away, her eyes focused on her children, who were now sitting on the edge of the fountain, their heads together as they whispered and laughed. They didn't understand any of this. To them, this was just their new home. But to the world, they were still strangers, still aliens in a place that wasn't ready to accept them. "What can we do?" Lyra asked, her voice barely audible. Victor exhaled sharply, as though the weight of the situation was pressing down on him. "We fight. We don't give up. But we need allies. People who understand what you and your children are going through. I've been in contact with a few key figures in the government who are sympathetic to your cause. But we need to act fast. The council won't wait forever. Lyra felt a surge of determination rise within her. She had already fought to survive, to find a place for her family in this world. She wasn't going to give up now. Not when her children were depending on her. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady now. "We will stay. We will fight for our place here." Victor nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "I'll make the arrangements. But know this, Lyra, it won't be easy. There will be people who will fight against us. There will be resistance." Lyra turned back to face him, her gaze firm. "I've already faced worse. I'll face whatever comes next. For them." For a moment, Victor just looked at her, as if seeing her in a new light. Then, with a small nod, he turned and walked away, his steps purposeful. As Lyra watched him go, her mind raced with thoughts of the future. She had chosen to stay, to fight for her children's future on this planet. But now, that fight was about to become much harder. There would be battles, both in the courtrooms and on the streets, but Lyra was ready. She had already lost so much, and she wasn't about to lose the one thing that mattered most, her family. She turned to her children, who were now standing at the edge of the fountain, looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. Lyra took a deep breath, a quiet promise to herself forming in her heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them. For her children, for their future, and for the chance to prove that humanity, and the universe, could accept them. Together, they would find a way. The following days were filled with uncertainty and quiet determination. Lyra, having made her choice to stay on Earth, knew that the fight ahead would not be easy. She had already seen the fear and resistance growing within the human society. The council's decision was looming over her like a dark cloud, and there were whispers everywhere. Some believed she and her children were a danger. Others were simply afraid of the unknown. But Lyra had learned one thing since coming to Earth. Fear could be overcome with patience, courage, and the right allies. Victor, true to his word, had begun to work on building support for her cause. He met with influential figures and reached out to those who were sympathetic to her plight. But it was not enough. The council's pressure continued to grow. They had already started pushing for laws that would restrict her family's stay, claiming that the presence of aliens on Earth would create instability. Lyra couldn't just sit back and let that happen. She had already lost everything once. She wasn't about to lose her children's future. One morning, Lyra stood in the garden, her hands clasped in front of her, as she watched the sunlight dance through the trees. The air was thick with tension. The mansion, once a symbol of safety, now felt like a prison. Every step she took seemed to echo with the weight of the decisions she had to make. She thought of her children, Nira and Kale, who were playing by the fountain, their faces innocent and unaware of the growing storm around them. They had not asked for this fight. They had not asked for a world that saw them as strangers. But Lyra knew that if she wanted to give them a chance, she had to stand up for them. Victor approached her quietly, his presence calming, though his expression was filled with concern. He had been her strongest ally through this entire journey. And now, more than ever, she needed him by her side. "Lyra, we have to act quickly. The council is meeting in 2 days. If we don't have enough support by then, we might lose everything." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "I won't let that happen. I've come this far, and I'm not going to back down now." Victor nodded, his brow furrowing with a mixture of pride and worry. "I know you won't. But the reality is, not everyone on Earth will accept you. Some will always see you as a threat. We need to focus on the people who will stand by you, who will fight with you." Lyra took a deep breath, letting the weight of his words settle in. It was true. There would always be those who feared the unknown, who couldn't see past their own prejudices. But there would also be those who understood, who would fight for fairness and justice. They needed to find those people, and they needed to do it quickly. That night, as she and Victor worked through their plans, Lyra found herself thinking of home, the planet where she and her people had lived, a world now lost to the ravages of war. She thought of her family, her friends, and the life they had once known. It felt like a lifetime ago, but she remembered the warmth of their smiles, the laughter of children playing in the streets. She wanted that life for Nira and Kale, a life where they didn't have to hide or feel like outsiders. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Kale's voice. "Mother, look!" he called out, his face lighting up with excitement. Lyra turned to see her son standing by the fountain, holding something small and bright in his hand. As he approached, she saw that it was a flower, one that was unlike any she had seen before. It was delicate, with petals that shimmered in the soft light. Kale's eyes were wide with pride as he handed it to her. "I picked this for you, Mother. It's special. It's for when you're feeling sad." Lyra's heart swelled with love. She knelt down to take the flower from him, her eyes welling with tears. "Thank you, Kale. It's beautiful." Victor watched from a distance, a quiet smile on his face. He knew the importance of moments like this, the small, tender moments that reminded Lyra why she was fighting. She was not just fighting for survival. She was fighting for a future where her children could grow up without fear, without having to prove their worth to a world that didn't understand them. The next day, they held a meeting at the mansion, inviting the few allies they had been able to gather. It was a small group, but their support meant everything. Victor spoke first, outlining the situation and the urgency of the matter. Lyra followed, her voice steady, but filled with emotion as she shared her story. She spoke of her people, of the war that had destroyed their world, and of her desire to give her children a future on Earth, where they could find peace and acceptance. One by one, the people in the room spoke. Some were skeptical, others were supportive, but as the hours passed, the tide began to turn. Lyra's words, her strength, and her unwavering determination touched something deep inside them. By the end of the meeting, they had gathered enough support to take their cause before the council. They weren't sure it would be enough, but it was a start. It was a chance. The council meeting came quickly, and Lyra stood before them, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was filled with powerful people, men and women who held the future of Earth in their hands. Lyra knew that this was the moment that would determine her family's fate. The room was quiet, tense with anticipation, as she began to speak. "I am not here to cause trouble," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am here because I believe in the future, a future where my children can grow up in peace, where they can find a place in this world. We have no desire to conquer or destroy. We only want to live, and we ask for the chance to do so." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, the members of the council began to speak. It was not an easy fight, but Lyra had made her case. She had shown them that her family was not a threat. They were simply survivors, just like humans had been for centuries. The vote was close, but in the end, the council agreed to give Lyra and her children the chance they deserved. Earth would not reject them. There would be challenges ahead, but for the first time since arriving, Lyra felt a glimmer of hope. They had won, not just for themselves, but for all those who had been cast aside by fear and misunderstanding. As Lyra walked out of the council chamber, she looked at her children, who were waiting for her. Nira and Kale ran to her, their faces filled with excitement and relief. Lyra knelt down to embrace them, her heart full of gratitude. They had a future here, a future together. Victor stood beside her, his expression proud. "You did it, Lyra." Lyra smiled, tears in her eyes. "We did it, together." And in that moment, Lyra knew that no matter what the future held, they had found a place in this world, a place where they could live, love, and build a future free of fear.